I'm a lecturer in experimental physics. I currently work at Newcastle University. I've had a very diversified background and experience. I started in chemistry back in Italy, moved to Ireland to do a PhD in physics, and then from there to the US, first in Colorado, then in Berkeley, and now back in England.
So could you tell me a bit about your career in research and what kind of challenges you faced?
It's been very interesting in a way, and there have been many challenges. What pulled me through those challenges was the fact that I decided to do what I like. And so even those challenging moments, I could afford them and I could face them, because I was still doing and I decided to do what I was interested in. So obviously, being an academic is a bit of a funnel. It's very competitive, and getting from the process of being a PhD student to a postdoc to your first staff position and then your permanent position is obviously, you have to go through a lot of rejection sometimes. And it's in hindsight now I realize, where some of those rejections were coming from or where some of those difficulties were coming from. But the moment you need to have a bit of resilience. Mm-hmm. And one thing that helped was at some point realizing that you need to be a fit to the institution you're applying to in order for you to get in that institution. So it's something that right now, I understand a bit better because I sit in hiring committees. So sometimes you have this brilliant CV, but then you don't have the instrument that they need, or you don't have enough resources to be able to really hire them. That is something that is not said often enough. Mm-hmm. And so I think that particularly for women, when we start to go through a couple of these rejection, we start to think about something is wrong. Yeah. In what we are doing, and sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah. And so what role does surface science play in addressing these issues specifically?
Oh, it has been literally the key that opened so many doors for me. Because doing XPS particularly, which is the technique that I've been mastering over the years, I could actually enter a different field and so diversify my portfolio of research. And when you have a bit of diversity in your portfolio of research, then it becomes a bit easier to fit your CV and fit your application to what that moment the different institutions are actually looking for. So it has been not only a key to enter different field, but also to enable some resilience in what I was saying, a very funnel type of career that we experience in academia. So, yeah.
And how do you see the field changing regarding gender balance?
I wish I could see more. I wish I could see more changes. There's been a bit of change in a sense that we do see a bit more women coming through the pipelines, and that is great. But it's still very competitive, and it's still. There are still challenges that are not quite addressed. So if you think about traveling to different facilities or going to the synchrotron, some of the instruments that we use are quite expensive. So we might have, 3 or 4 in the country, but not in your own institution. I support currently some of the women that have kids, and it's very difficult for them to be able to travel at all. So it's still not a system that is structured in a way that support women to the extent that it should. And oftentimes is one of the things that is not very much discussed, but it's not so much money that is missing. Even if I think about the experience that I have with some of my students, we could find the fundings to actually allow the trip or even, a child carer for the time being. Mm-hmm. But the actual facilities and the infrastructure around, dealing with a minor child that needs to be cared for during that time, they're not very much there. So there is a lot that still needs to be done in terms of enabling women, and particularly enabling women that have care responsibility. Now, it would be equally the same if you had a single parent that is male. Yeah. So in a sense, fixing this type of situation might actually help both male and female However, in my experience, I came less often across a man that had to deal with a child and be the primary carer for that child.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue that disproportionately affects women. But as you say, it can help everyone, really, can't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what does the gender landscape look like for you in terms of young researchers or students within both, your research group and the wider community you interact with?
Yeah. Right now it's quite gender balanced, and I'm pretty pleased about it. I hope it will continue to be more or less like that, both in terms of the students that are directly working with me, but I also collaborate across fields. So it comes a bit in waves. Sometimes we have more male, sometimes we have more female. But if I have to think across, years and time and so on, then it's quite even out. And I hope that it will continue to be like that. Part of that, I believe, is also the fact that somewhat I'm trying to make it up for some of the difficulties. So women that, as I said, cannot travel, I will happily take their samples and still try to match their schedule when it comes to training in the data analysis and so on. So if we can see a bit more of that flexibility to accommodate, then probably we can keep having women in science, particularly in surface science.
Yeah. So it sounds like for you personally, you've kind of helped other women out knowing that they have these difficulties.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like a role of community almost and sisterhood. Is that something that you think will take us quite far in terms of gender balance? And
I hope so. And it's also a matter of getting some of the male professor and academics involved. I think that some of them, they can be very sensible and sensitive to the subject. So it's not just us as women that should be having this type of conversation, but also trying to bring some of the male professor and academics into the conversation can actually help in getting some of these issues solved and ironed out.
Yeah. And so you've been quite geographically mobile throughout your career. How would you say the UK compares to maybe some other regions that you've worked in regarding gender balance?
I think that it's more or less on par. And for sure, I would have not moved to the country if that was not the case, So I believe that we are not doing any worse than many other places that I've been in. However, I think that there is still a lot that needs to be done across the different countries I've worked and the UK as well. I think that in the future, women will look more closely at what an institution and a country can offer in terms of supporting them. So I believe that we should continue to try to improve, and there is plenty of room for improvement. This is becoming more and more important. So, as I said, the fact that it was on par with other places where I've been was okay for me to move in, because I know that I would have not lose anything with respect to what I had. And in terms of maternity leaves and ability to flexible working and having caring responsibility, I think UK has a pretty decent legislation. Obviously, the practicality, as we were discussing, sometimes can be challenging. And I think that if we can improve and become better than other countries or lead the innovation in that aspect, I think that will help also with recruiting international young people or academics.
So I think it's interesting that you said you wouldn't have gone to certain places or institutions had they not been gender balanced. Is that something that you feel like perhaps a man wouldn't have to consider that if they were applying places? Do you think maybe a man would have that thought of, will I be accepted for my gender here, and should I apply based on that? Or
it depends. So some of the men, they will maybe not care about that, but some others, they just don't want to work in an environment that is not welcoming of women. I've seen that. I've seen throughout the years some men getting really fed up with a system that might not be balanced because they've seen talented colleagues leaving the field of academia because of, the environment was not welcoming, and it's not something that they appreciated themselves. Those were colleagues that they might very well wanted to work and continue to work with, and it was not okay to them as men to lose a good colleagues just because the system was not allowing that person to succeed. In a sense, if we think more broadly as society, if we have a system that doesn't allow a certain fraction of the population, whatever that fraction is, to be successful because the system is not constructed in a way that enables that person, all the creativity, all the innovation, all the good things that that person could produce, as society, we are missing on those. And I think this is more and more becoming something that male colleagues are aware of. And I can tell you that I've been helped across my career by several male colleagues that they wanted to support me. So that is one of the progress that I've seen that is very nice to see, people that are not maybe your same gender or your same orientation or your same ethnicity, but they appreciate your quality for your quality. That's it.
Yeah. And it sounds like, we're talking about policies and, maybe legislation that the UK has in place, but it sounds also like there's a really personal touch to this, that you can implement all the policy that you want. But I think what I'm hearing is what's made a difference to you is that people have wanted you on board and believed in you and fought your corner, and that's something that necessarily policy can't do.
Yes, it's a cultural change that needs to happen. And obviously I've met also the opposite. I've met people that were trying to derail me. But having the support of male and female colleagues, it's something that is very personal in a sense, but it is also very cultural. If we start to educate ourselves, or if we start to have some of this conversation a bit more and a bit more openly, that can happen. That can help opening up doors for the women that are coming through the pipelines. And some of this conversation, I'm not going to lie, sometimes breaking the ice to initiate that type of conversation can be difficult and can be awkward. You are always conscious of not hurting somebody's feeling, but it's important to have those conversations, even if sometimes they're not the most comfortable space you want to be.